A widow whispers, "I'm too old for this," as a winter storm howls across the Kansas plains. She's alone, her debts rising, her faith gone cold, until a quiet Amish man opens his door and his heart. But what begins as shelter from the blizzard turns into something neither expected. In his home of prayer and silence, she finds warmth and danger. Because the town wants her land, and his bishop wants obedience. When rules clash with compassion and faith collides with survival, hearts will be tested like never before. He risks excommunication. She risks losing everything she has left. Yet in the snow and firelight, something holy stirs, a love the world forbids, but heaven might bless, as the storm deepens and secrets surface. Can a broken widow and a banished man rebuild faith before the winter takes it all? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now. And if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The wind howled like a living thing across the Kansas plain. It whistled through the bare cottonwoods, dragged snow over the wagon ruts, and bit at Olivia Stenner's cheeks until they burned red. Her gloved hands trembled on the reins, but she held fast. She had made it this far, and she wasn't about to turn back, not when the taxman's letter sat heavy in her coat pocket. If she could just reach the tenant's cabin before nightfall, she might collect enough to keep her land one more winter. The sky was already the color of pewter. She could feel the storm rolling in by the ache in her bones. The old horse huffed clouds of white steam and tossed his head, anxious. Olivia patted his neck. "Easy now, Sam. We'll make it there and back," she murmured, though doubt pressed on her chest like a stone. A wall of snow swept across the horizon. It moved fast, swallowing fence posts, then the far-off line of hills. The first flakes struck her face like needles. She leaned forward, squinting through the blur. The world went white in minutes. The trail vanished. "Lord help me," she whispered, but her voice was lost in the wind. The horse spooked as thunder cracked overhead. The wagon lurched sideways, wheel hitting a hidden drift. Olivia screamed as the seat tipped and she tumbled into the snow. The shock stole her breath. For a moment she just lay there, staring at the dark blur of sky and feeling the cold bite through her clothes. The horse bolted into the white void, the jingle of harness fading fast. "Sam!" she shouted, but it was useless. She tried to stand. Her legs shook. The wind tore at her shawl. The snow was already deep around her boots. The prairie was an empty, roaring sea of white. She turned in circles, searching for any sign of shelter. Fence, barn, smoke, anything. Then, through the storm, she caught a flicker of light. A lamp. She staggered toward it, stumbling over drifts. Every few steps she fell to her knees. Her fingers went numb. The light disappeared, then blinked back again, closer now. She pushed harder, teeth clenched, lungs burning. When she finally reached the door, her strength gave out. She pounded weakly with her fist, once, twice, before the world tilted black. The door opened. Warm lamplight spilled over her frozen face. A man stood there, broad-shouldered, bearded, dressed in plain wool and suspenders. His hat shadowed his eyes. He hesitated only a heartbeat before kneeling beside her. "God above," he muttered, lifting her gently. Snow clung to her hair and lashes. Her lips were blue. "Easy now," he said softly, carrying her inside. The room glowed golden from a wood stove in the corner. The air smelled of pine, smoke, and bread. He laid her on a quilted cot near the fire, stripped off her soaked gloves, and rubbed her hands briskly. "You'll not freeze tonight, ma'am," he said, voice low but sure. When she stirred, he added, "You're safe." She tried to speak, but her lips barely moved. Her eyelids fluttered. He poured hot water into a tin cup and touched it to her mouth. "Just a sip," he said. She swallowed, shivering uncontrollably. Her eyes flicked open. For a moment she saw only the orange glow of firelight and the stranger's face above her. Weathered, kind, framed by a plain black beard. Behind him hung shelves of hand-carved tools and a wooden cross. Everything was clean, orderly, quiet. She blinked again. "Whose house?" "Mine," he said simply. "You'll rest now." Her vision blurred. The warmth, the crackle of the stove, and the stranger's calm voice pulled her into sleep. Somewhere in the dark of her dreaming, she thought she heard him praying. Not for her life, but for her peace. When Olivia woke, morning light spilled through the frosted window. Her body ached, but she was alive. The fire still burned. Her shawl had been hung to dry, and a bowl of steaming broth sat beside the cot. She sat up slowly, looking around. The cabin was small but solid. Every piece of furniture had been built by hand, smooth pine, polished by years of care. A single Bible rested open on the table, beside a carpenter's square and folded cloth. The man stood near the window, his back to her, mending a leather strap. "You're awake," he said, not turning. "I am," she answered hoarsely, "and mighty sore." "That'll pass." He set the strap aside and came closer. "Storm near buried the wagon. I'll fetch it out when it clears." Olivia frowned. "You shouldn't trouble yourself. You near froze to death out there," he interrupted gently. "Best not move till you're steady." She studied him. The man was older than she'd first thought, perhaps in his 50s, but strong. Shoulders broad from years of labor, hands scarred but steady. His clothes were plain homespun gray, his voice calm as still water. "You live alone?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "And you're Amish?" "Aye." She gave a small, humorless laugh. "Figures. The Lord must be having a jest, sending me to the only man in the county who won't talk much." A hint of a smile touched his beard. Sometimes silence is mercy. They ate together quietly. She was too tired to argue, too curious to leave. When she finally stood, her knees buckled. He caught her elbow and steadied her. "I don't need," she began, but he shook his head. "I know, but you'll have help anyway." Later, as dusk fell again, and wind whispered against the eaves, Olivia lay awake under his quilts, listening to him murmur a prayer at the hearth. The words were simple and soft, spoken more like conversation than ritual. When he finished, he stayed by the fire for a long while, head bowed. Olivia turned her face into the pillow, eyes wet though she didn't know why. She'd told herself she was done with faith long ago. But something about that voice and that prayer made her heart stir like embers under ashes. Outside, the storm kept howling, but inside the little cabin, warmth and quiet wrapped around her like grace. Morning and the next morning came gray and cold, one folded into the next like hard bread. The storm did not leave all at once. It eased, then gathered, then eased again, as if the sky could not make up its mind. Olivia slept in short pieces, drifting up to the light and down to the heat of the stove. Each time she woke, she felt the ache in her bones ease a little more. The stranger moved about the cabin with quiet steps, tending the fire, checking the kettle, laying more quilts at the foot of her cot. He did not hover, but he was always nearby. On the second morning, when her head cleared enough to feel shame rise, she pushed herself up and said, "Sir, I am much obliged, but I've taken too much of your time." He set a tin cup of water on the table and answered in a steady voice, "You took what you needed to live. That is not too much." She stared at him a long moment. "I never got your name." "Noah Yoder," he said. Olivia Stenner. He nodded, as if to say he would keep that safe. She tried to stand. The room swayed. Noah reached out and steadied her elbow. His hand was warm and rough. She pulled away too fast, then had to catch the edge of the table to keep from falling. He did not make a sound of scold or pity. He only slid a chair closer with his boot so she could sit. The cabin showed its nature in little ways. Each board had been planed smooth by a careful hand. Each joint fit tight enough to keep out a draft. A shelf held carved spoons, a wooden mallet, and a small plane with a burnished handle. Pegs by the door bore a plain black coat and a felt hat. The Bible on the table lay open to Psalms. The words had soft wear at the edges, as if they had been visited many times. Noah ladled broth into a blue tin bowl. Steam rose. He set it in front of her with a heel of brown bread. "Best start light," he said. She took one sip, then another, then did not stop until the bowl was empty. The rich salt taste woke her stomach. She glanced up. "I can pay you for food, for wood too." "No need." "It will put me in your debt," she said, fighting to keep her voice even. "I don't stand well in anyone's debt." He met her eyes. They were the color of creek water under ice. "It ain't a debt. It's neighborly," she snorted. "I have not been a good neighbor, not since—" She cut the words short and stared at the knots in the tabletop. The storm rattled the window. Snow pressed against the pane like white cloth. Noah did not push for more. He set another log on the fire. "I will walk out when the wind drops and see to your wagon," he said. "If the drifts allow, I'll bring it near. If not, I'll mark it so I can fetch it later." "Sam?" she asked, the word catching in her throat. "My horse?" "I followed tracks at first light. They ran north and then vanished on crusted snow. He's likely tucked himself in a draw. I'll look again once the weather clears. Horses have more sense than men in a blow." She let out a breath she had not known she was holding. "Thank you." The day held to its gray. Noah cleaned his tools and mended a harness strap at the window, where what little light there was could help him see. Olivia dozed again, waking to the steady sound of a rasp over leather, the soft thud of the mallet, the whisper of the plane on wood. The sounds were humble and human. They settled her. Toward late afternoon, Noah lifted the latch and opened the door a crack. Wind shoved against it. Snow sheets danced across the yard, piling high against the fence rails. He closed the door and set the bar. "Another night of it," he said. Olivia drew the quilt closer to her chin. "I was a fool going out alone," she said, eyes on the stove. "There was a debt owed. I thought to bring it back before the taxman came again." "Some walks we think are about money," he said. "They turn out to be about mercy." She looked up, ready to argue, then let the words pass. She did not have strength to wrestle with them. Supper was simple: boiled potatoes, a sliver of salt pork, and fried onions that filled the room with a sweet brown smell. Noah bowed his head over the table and waited. Olivia sat stiff, unsure if he meant to say grace. After a quiet heartbeat, his voice came low. "Father, we thank thee for food and fire, for breath and one more day. Give us peace." Peace. Not health, not success, not even safety on the trail. Peace. Olivia kept her eyes open and watched his face. The lines at the corners of his eyes eased, as if even speaking the word put warm hands on his shoulders. When they finished eating, she pushed her plate away. "I didn't ask you to pray for me," she said, more sharp than she meant. "No, ma'am," he answered. "You didn't." "Why do it then?" "Because it is right," he said, "and because I have learned that peace makes room for healing, whether a body wishes it or not." She studied him. You speak like a man who knows what it is to be without peace." "I do." The fire snapped. The room glowed orange on wood and iron. A kettle chattered soft on the hob. Olivia folded the quilt in her lap, then unfolded it again. The tight place behind her ribs loosened a little. She did not want to feel that. She had built good walls these past years. They had cost her time. They had cost her tears. But they had kept her safe. Noah rose and checked the door again. He tried the window latch. He laid a stick of kindling on the fire and stood with his hands near the heat. "You should sleep," he said. "Tomorrow, if the Lord calms the wind, I'll hitch the team and drive you home." She heard the word home and felt a tug behind the word. Her place stood empty on the rise east of town. The roof was tired. A shutter hung crooked. The barn sagged. But it was hers. It was where her husband, dead 3 winters now, had leaned his rifle by the door and said he would be right back, and then had not come back. It was where she had counted coins by lamplight and watched the numbers fall short, then fall short again. She nodded. "All right." Night came early. The cabin sank into the hush that only deep snow brings, the kind that swallows sound and fear at once. Noah banked the stove and blew out the lamp, leaving only a thin bar of light from the fire. He took a quilt from a peg and lay down on a pallet near the door. He did not ask if she was comfortable. He had already looked to that. He did not speak her name again. He did not need to fill the air. After a while, Olivia heard him whisper. The words were not for her ears, but they found her anyway. "Lord, give her rest. Give her your nearness. Give her peace." She lay on her side, facing the stove, eyes open to the faint red square of the firebox door. Snow ticked against the window like dry rice. Her throat ached. She pulled the quilt up and pressed her face into the wool. A hot tear slid across her nose and into the blanket. She did not know if she wept for the storm, or for the word peace, or for the way a strange man's kindness could shake the whole house of her pride. Before sleep took her, she said one small sentence into the dark. "If you are there, hear me." The storm answered with a low gust, and then a lull, as if the sky itself was listening. The wind calmed after 2 more days. A thin crust of ice shimmered over the drifts, bright as silver. Noah's horses stamped and snorted in the morning stillness, eager for open air. Olivia stood in the doorway of the cabin, bundled in her shawl, watching as Noah harnessed the team. Her cheeks were pale, her lips chapped, but her eyes held that old fire again, the stubborn kind that had kept her alive this long. "I can take the reins," she said, stepping toward the wagon he'd pulled from the snow. Noah shook his head. "Not till your legs stop wobbling." "My legs don't wobble." He gave a quiet smile. "Then why are you holding the doorframe like it's a lifeline?" She scowled, but climbed aboard without another word. The wagon creaked as they started out. Snow stretched to every side, smooth as linen. The sun shone faint and cold through a thin veil of cloud. No sound but the steady rhythm of hooves and the jingle of harness. It took nearly 3 hours to reach the rise where Olivia's homestead stood. The place looked smaller than she remembered. Roof half collapsed on one side, fences bent low under ice. Noah halted the team by the gate. Olivia climbed down, boots crunching on frozen earth. "Home," she said quietly, and the word trembled on her tongue. Noah followed, unloading a few bundles from the wagon bed. "I brought what's left of your supplies from the wreck. The rest's in the shed." Inside, the little house smelled of dust and cold iron. Olivia opened the stove door, empty, rusting, and sighed. On the table lay a handful of unopened letters. She gathered them with a frown. One envelope bore the seal of the county clerk. She tore it open, reading by the dim light through the window. The words hit hard. Final notice of delinquent tax payment. Property subject to claim by the Central Rail Company within 30 days. Her throat closed. "They can't," she whispered. "This land's mine. I paid my share." Noah, standing by the doorway, watched her face pale. "Bad news?" She folded the letter fast and slipped it into her coat. "Nothing that concerns you." He studied her quietly. "You've got that look again. The kind a body gets when pride won't let truth breathe. I don't need a sermon." "No," he said. "Just help." Olivia turned to the window. Snowflakes drifted slow outside, gentle now. "I've managed alone before." He nodded once, no argument in him, only that steady calm that unsettled her more than anger ever could. "Then I'll see to your barn before I go. The roof's sagged. If it gives, you'll lose what feed you have." "You'll do no such thing," she snapped. "You've done enough already." He set his hat low on his brow. "The Lord says if a man sees his neighbor's ox fall in a ditch, he pulls it out. Doesn't wait for thanks." Olivia folded her arms tight across her chest. "My ox ain't fallen." He glanced at the broken barn door hanging on one hinge. "It's leaning awful close." Before she could answer, he stepped outside, grabbing his tools from the wagon. His quiet defiance caught her off guard. She watched through the frosted window as he began prying boards loose, moving with that same slow care he showed in every task. Anger warmed her cheeks, but behind it lay something else. Fear, maybe. Fear of owing him. Fear of what kindness could stir up in her heart. By dusk, he had patched half the roof. His shoulders glistened, with frost, breath puffing white. She opened the door. "You'll catch your death out there," she called. He looked over. "Then I'll die doing something that matters." That silenced her. After a long moment, she sighed and held the door open wider. "Come in, at least for supper. The stove's working again." He stepped inside, stamping snow from his boots, the small space filled with the smell of iron, smoke, and thawed bacon. Olivia ladled stew into 2 bowls. They ate at the table without much talk. When she finally spoke, her tone softened. "You don't seem afraid of storms." "I've lived through worse," he said. "What kind?" He stirred his spoon slowly, eyes distant. "Fire. The kind that takes more than you can build back." She didn't press. The silence between them felt different now, not cold, but weighted with shared things neither could say. Outside, the wind picked up again, brushing snow against the window. Olivia thought of the letter in her pocket, of the words property subject to claim. The paper felt heavy as stone. She wanted to tell him. She almost did. But pride closed her mouth again. When Noah rose to leave, she said, "Thank you for the roof." He touched the brim of his hat. "You're welcome, ma'am. I'll come by in the morning. Best not let the barn face another night alone." "I told you I can manage." He smiled faintly. "You'll forgive me if I don't believe that." Then he was gone, his figure fading into the white twilight. Olivia sat by the stove long after the door shut, listening to the faint echo of his boots crunching on snow until it disappeared. She drew the letter from her coat again and read it under the lamplight. Her eyes burned, the words blurred. She pressed her forehead to her hands. 30 days, she whispered. "Lord, what am I supposed to do?" The stove crackled softly in answer. Outside, the stars brightened over the prairie. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled. A lonely, mournful sound that might have been prayer. When she finally rose to bank the fire, the quiet of the cabin pressed around her like a promise. She did not yet know it, but the man who had refused to walk away had already changed the course of her winter. The next morning dawned pale and brittle. Frost lined the window panes like lace, and the cold bit at every seam of Olivia's house. She woke to the sound of hammering, steady, measured strikes against wood. Pulling on her shawl, she peered through the front window and saw Noah Yoder's wagon parked by the barn again. He'd brought fresh lumber, neatly stacked, and his sleeves were rolled up despite the cold. She opened the door. "Didn't I tell you not to trouble yourself?" she called out, her breath fogging in the air. Noah didn't look up. "You did. I heard you clear as a bell. And I'm not troubling myself. I'm fixing your barn before it troubles you." She crossed her arms. "You've got a stubborn streak, mister." He paused, straightened, and wiped his brow with the back of his gloved hand. "I reckon I do. Comes from being told too many times that what's broken can't be fixed." His words hit something soft inside her. She turned away before he could see her expression. The day wore on, with the slow rhythm of rebuilding. Noah worked with quiet patience, measuring each board twice before nailing it into place. Olivia, against her better judgment, fetched water and held planks steady while he set new beams. She told herself it was just to speed him along so he'd leave sooner. But when the sun climbed higher and her fingers thawed from the work, she realized she didn't mind his company half as much as she'd thought. Around noon, she boiled coffee and carried a cup out to where he worked. He took it with a nod. "Much obliged." "You don't take cream or sugar?" she asked. "Not since I was a boy. Sweet things don't last. I learned to take life plain." She smiled in spite of herself. "That sounds exactly like something an Amish man would say." He chuckled softly. "And you sound like someone who's spent too long doing without either." That shut her up for a spell. By afternoon, the wind began to rise, swirling small flurries around the open yard. Noah secured the last of the boards, his hammer echoing through the crisp air. Olivia watched him work, her thoughts turning like restless crows. She'd always prided herself on standing alone, but there was something about his quiet strength that unnerved her. He didn't ask anything in return, didn't seem to expect thanks, only to serve. When he finished, he wiped his hands on a rag and stepped back to survey the barn. "It'll hold through the rest of winter," he said. "Maybe longer if you keep the snow from piling on the north side." Olivia hesitated, unsure what to say. She'd meant to send him away with a sharp word, but what came out instead was soft. "You didn't have to do that. I'm not your kin." He looked at her, eyes steady. Kin's not only by blood. Sometimes it's by need. Before she could answer, the clop of hooves drew their attention. A rider appeared on the road, a young man in a postman's coat, face red from the cold. "Mrs. Stenner?" he called, stopping at the gate. "Letter for you, ma'am. Came down from Topeka." Olivia took it, frowning at the unfamiliar handwriting. "Thank you, son." The rider tipped his cap and rode on. She tore the envelope open. Her breath caught as she read. The paper trembled in her hands. "They've filed it," she whispered. "What is it?" Noah asked. "The railroad," she said, voice breaking. "They've gone to the land office. They mean to take my property by month's end." He stepped closer. "They can't take what's rightly yours." "They can if I can't pay the tax." Her throat tightened. "I told you before, I don't want your pity. This is my fight." He studied her for a moment, calm and thoughtful. "It don't look like a fight that needs pride. It looks like one that needs prayer and hammer nails." "I don't need your prayers," she snapped. Noah didn't flinch. "Then I'll give you my hands instead." Her eyes burned. "Why do you care?" He was silent for a moment before he spoke. Because once, someone helped me when I didn't want help either. I was too proud to thank him then. But I learned that when God sends a man to your door, turning him away doesn't make you strong. It makes you lonely. Olivia folded the letter tight and shoved it into her coat pocket. You talk like you know everything about God. No, he said quietly. I just know he doesn't stop knocking, even when we pretend we don't hear. She turned away, unable to look at him. The sky had turned gray again, the wind sharper. He gathered his tools and loaded the wagon, giving her space. When he climbed onto the seat, he tipped his hat. I'll be by tomorrow with some boards to brace that east wall. Storms like this don't ask permission. Before she could argue, he flicked the reins, and the horses pulled away. The sound of the wheels creaked across the frozen ground until it vanished down the road. Olivia stood alone in the yard, clutching the letter. The wind lifted her shawl and tossed her hair into her face. She looked toward the horizon, where the last of the daylight burned like a dying ember. She told herself she didn't need anyone. But the truth was harder to ignore, with every echo of that hammer still ringing in her ears. When night fell, she sat at the kitchen table and read the letter again by lamplight. Her hand trembled as she traced the final line. Failure to remit payment will result in property seizure under federal claim. She set the paper down and stared at the crossbeam Noah had repaired that morning, still damp from melted snow. His words echoed softly through her mind. It don't look like a fight that needs pride. For the first time in a long while, Olivia whispered a prayer she didn't fully believe in. Lord, if you still hear me, show me what to do. Outside, the wind eased. Somewhere out on the prairie, a wolf howled, a lonely sound that faded into peace. The next morning broke clear and pale, the kind of cold that made the air brittle and bright. Olivia stepped out to the porch and saw Noah's wagon already parked beside the barn. He was there, shoulders bent to his work, breath turning to clouds in the air. She shook her head, but found herself smiling just a little before she caught it. Don't you ever take a day off? She called. He paused mid-swing, resting his hammer on the beam. The barn don't wait for Sabbath. She walked closer, her boots crunching on the snow. You're going to work yourself to death out here. Noah wiped his brow, then looked up at the sky, where the sun sat faint as milk. Better to wear out than rust out. That answer silenced her. She stood watching him, the measured rhythm of his hammer easing some of the noise in her own mind. Finally, she picked up a bucket of nails and carried it to him. You can hand me those boards next, he said without looking up. If you're bound to argue, you might as well make yourself useful. I reckon I can do that, she said, biting back a smile. They worked together through the morning. Her hands, soft from too many lonely winters, began to sting and callous again. Between each swing of the hammer, they traded small words about the land and the weather. Safe talk that covered up what neither of them dared mention. The letter in her pocket, the railroad's threat, the strange comfort she felt in his steady company. By midday, she motioned toward the house. You'll eat something before you freeze. He hesitated, but she had already turned and gone inside. When he stepped through the door a few minutes later, the smell of warm soup filled the air. Onions, potatoes, a bit of ham. The fire crackled softly. She ladled broth into 2 bowls and set one before him. I don't usually cook for strangers, she said, sitting down. Don't get used to it. He bowed his head briefly in silent prayer, then lifted his spoon. Don't worry, I don't get used to much. They ate quietly. The wind scraped against the window, whispering like faraway voices. When the bowls were empty, Olivia leaned back, studying him. "You're not like most men," she said finally. "Most men talk too much or drink too much. You just sit there." "Silence has its uses," he said. "Noise fills the air. Silence lets you hear what's left inside." Her gaze drifted toward the fire. "I've heard too much of what's inside. I'd rather drown it out." "You lost someone," he said softly, not as a question but as truth spoken aloud. Her hand froze around the spoon. "You have no right to ask that." "I didn't ask," he said. "I just see it." For a long time, she said nothing. Then her shoulders sagged. "My husband. 3 winters ago. Shot dead trying to stop a robbery in town. Sheriff said he died doing the right thing. I never much cared for the right thing after that." Noah nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the fire. "I lost mine too, my wife and son. Lightning took the barn, and them with it." Her breath caught. "You stayed here after that?" He shook his head. "No, left my district. Couldn't stand the pity. I came west to build something again, even if it was only fences and wagons." Olivia looked down at her hands, red and raw from the day's work. "So that's what you do? Build things for strangers?" "I build what's needed," he said quietly. "Sometimes that's a roof. Sometimes it's a little piece." She met his eyes, and for the first time, she didn't look away. The lamplight flickered over his face, lined and calm, carved by both loss and grace. She saw the weight he carried, and how he bore it without bitterness. The fire snapped, breaking the silence. Olivia cleared her throat and stood. "You'll catch cold if you stay much longer." He rose, putting on his coat. "I'll finish the east wall tomorrow." "I told you." He stopped her with a small smile. "And I told you I'd help. You might as well save your breath." Something in her chest warmed, a feeling she hadn't known in years. "You're a hard man to argue with." "Not hard," he said. "Just stubborn where it matters." He stepped outside into the twilight. She followed him to the door, watching as he hitched the team and climbed into the wagon. Snowflakes drifted down, soft and slow. "Noah!" she called before she could stop herself. He turned back, reins in hand. "Thank you. For everything." He tipped his hat. "You're welcome, ma'am." As he rode away, the sound of the horses faded into the white dusk, leaving only the faint creak of the barn door behind him. Olivia stood there for a long time, the wind brushing cold against her face. Inside, the warmth of the house pressed at her back like an embrace she didn't know how to accept. When she finally turned in for the night, she lit a single candle by the window. The little flame flickered against the dark, and she whispered, "Maybe some things can be built again." It wasn't quite a prayer, but it was close. Outside, the snow fell quietly over the land, covering the scars of old winters, just as faith, slow and steady, began to cover hers. A pale dawn rose over the prairie, light spreading thin across the snowfields like milk poured over glass. Olivia woke to the faint ring of hammering again. Noah's wagon sat near the barn, horses steaming in the cold. The sight stirred both comfort and irritation in her chest. She bundled herself in her shawl, muttering, "That man'll fix every inch of this place whether I like it or not." When she stepped outside, Noah was setting the last of the braces into the east wall. "Morning," he said simply, voice carrying through the frost. "Morning," she answered. "You work faster than the sun." He grinned faintly. The sun's never had to keep a barn roof from collapsing. By noon, a small sled appeared over the ridge. Ruth Ann Miller, the Mennonite midwife, with her shawl tied tight and cheeks red as apples. She dismounted, waving. "I heard you near froze last week, Olivia. The whole town's talking about how an Amish widower took you in during the storm." Olivia frowned. "Talking? What for?" Ruth Ann laughed kindly. "You know how folk are. One whisper in the snow and it grows legs." Noah looked up from his work, brow creasing. "There's no shame in helping someone." Ruth Ann nodded approvingly. "No shame at all, but not everyone out here knows the difference between compassion and courtship." Olivia rolled her eyes. "I'm too old for that nonsense." Ruth Ann smiled gently. "Maybe, but hearts don't keep calendars, dear." When the midwife left, Olivia noticed Noah's face was tight with thought. "Does it trouble you?" she asked. He set down his hammer. "Not for myself, but among the Amish, folks talk the same. The bishop won't favor it." "I didn't ask you to risk your reputation," she said, suddenly guilty. Noah's voice softened. "You didn't have to. Doing right costs something, always has." That night, she invited him to supper as thanks for his help. The wind was picking up again, brushing against the windows with restless hands. Inside, the warmth of the stove made the air shimmer. Olivia stirred venison stew, its scent filling the kitchen. When Noah sat, she bowed her head for grace before he could. "Lord," she said quietly, "thank you for food, for shelter, and for those who come when you send them. Amen." When she looked up, his eyes were bright, not with pride, but with something gentle, like sunlight after snow. "Amen," he echoed. They ate mostly in silence. Afterward, Noah leaned back, eyes on the fire. "You used to pray regular?" She shook her head. "Not since my husband died. Felt like my prayers froze in my throat back then." Noah reached for the poker, stirring the embers. "Then maybe they've been waiting for you to thaw." For a while, neither spoke. The fire's light danced across the walls, painting warm color over wood that had seen too much gray. Olivia's heart softened in the quiet. She began humming. A tune she hadn't touched in years, a hymn her husband used to sing after supper. Noah looked up, a small smile at the corner of his mouth. "I know that one," he said softly. "Rock of Ages." She hesitated, then nodded. "My mother sang it when storms came." Noah's voice joined hers, low, deep, and steady. The sound filled the little house. Two tired voices, singing into the long winter night, each note stitching something broken back together. When the hymn ended, Olivia felt tears pricking her eyes. She wiped them quickly and said, half laughing, "You'll have me crying next." Noah stood, putting on his coat. "Then maybe the thaw's already begun." She watched him go, the door closing softly behind him. For a long time, she stood by the fire, staring into its glow. The old loneliness that had clung to her for years felt lighter now, like snow melting under the first strong sun. She knelt by the hearth before bed, unsure if she was praying or just talking into the quiet. "Lord," she whispered, "I don't know what you're doing, but it feels like grace." Outside, the stars shimmered over the frozen prairie, and from far off came the faint, contented sound of Noah's team moving through the snow toward home. Snow melted slow that week, the world turning from white to brown again. The barn stood strong under its new beams, and the air smelled, faintly, of thawing earth. Olivia had begun to feel a strange rhythm to her days. Work, quiet, and the rare warmth that came with Noah's visits. She'd catch herself waiting for the creak of his wagon wheels, and then scold herself for it. One morning, she stepped outside with a pail just as a black buggy approached up the road. It wasn't Noah's wagon. 2 horses, fine-boned and steady, pulled it toward her gate. The driver wore a plain black coat and broad-brimmed hat. His face was solemn, marked by years of discipline and duty. She didn't need an introduction. She knew authority when she saw it. The man stopped, climbed down, and nodded. "Good morning, ma'am. Is Noah Yoder here?" Her chest tightened. "He's in the barn." The stranger tipped his hat politely. "Thank you." She watched him stride across the yard. A minute later, the hammering inside the barn stopped. Through the open door, she saw Noah wipe his hands on his trousers and step forward to greet the man. The two spoke in low tones at first, then louder. The words weren't angry, but heavy, as if they carried more than either man wanted to say aloud. Olivia couldn't hear it all, but she caught pieces. Disobedience. Risk. The Ordnung. Her stomach knotted. After several minutes, Noah and the bishop walked toward the house. Noah's face was calm but pale. The bishop's eyes were firm. "You're the widow, ma'am," he said. "I am." He inclined his head, his tone polite but cold. "Your need has stirred much talk. The Amish community takes charity seriously, but we also take our rules seriously. Noah is bound by them, as we all are." Olivia folded her arms. "And what rule says a man can't help his neighbor?" "None," the bishop replied. "But the rule says he must not court or keep company with outsiders who draw him away from obedience. It's a small line, ma'am, but one that matters." Her face flushed hot. "He's been mending my barn, not courting me." The bishop's expression didn't soften. "Intentions are known only to God, but appearances speak loud in small towns. Noah knows this." He turned to Noah. "You will stop this work, return home, and seek counsel with your brethren. The district has no place for divided loyalty." Noah's jaw set. "Bishop, I've done nothing against the word. I've only lent a hand." The older man's gaze hardened. "And yet your heart speaks louder than your hands. If you continue, we will have no choice but to begin disciplinary steps. You understand what that means?" "I do," Noah said quietly. The bishop's eyes softened just a fraction. "You are a good man, Noah Yoder. Don't let sentiment lead you into pride." He turned to Olivia. "Good day, ma'am." Then he walked back to his buggy, snow crunching beneath his boots, and drove away. When the sound of hooves faded, Olivia turned on Noah. "You'd better do as he says. I won't have you losing your place because of me." He looked at her, calm and steady. "I've already lost a place once. I won't lose what's right this time." "You're too stubborn for your own good," she snapped. "Maybe," he said, stepping closer. "But I learned something when I buried my family, Olivia. Obedience without love is just another kind of death." Her throat closed. "Don't talk like that." He smiled faintly. "It's the truth. The bishop thinks I'm disobedient. Maybe I am. But I'll take God's mercy over man's approval any day." She didn't know what to say. The afternoon light slanted through the barn door, turning the dust in the air to gold. For a long moment they just stood there, two souls caught between worlds, hers of grief and pride, his of faith and defiance. Finally, Noah broke the silence. "I'll still help with the repairs. The storm's not done yet." "You'll be excommunicated," she whispered. He shrugged lightly. "Then I'll pray outside the door." Her heart twisted. "Why? Why risk it?" He looked at her with that quiet conviction that never raised its voice. "Because God didn't give me strong hands just to build barns. He gave them to lift people when they fall, and right now, you're standing in a ditch deeper than you know." Tears burned in her eyes. "You think I need saving?" "No," he said softly. "I think you need reminding that you're already saved." For once, she couldn't speak. He gathered his tools and headed toward the wagon, his figure dark against the pale snow. That night, the house felt emptier than it had in years. Olivia sat by the fire, staring at the faint glow on the hearth. Outside, the wind shifted, moaning through the eaves. She wanted to pray but couldn't find the words. When sleep finally came, it was fitful. She dreamed of a barn in flames and a man standing in the doorway refusing to leave. The fire didn't consume him. It shone from him, steady and pure. When she woke, tears streaked her cheeks, but her heart was no longer hard. It hurt, but it was beating again. The sun came out at last, bright, sharp, and almost too cheerful for the heaviness sitting on Olivia's heart. A crust of ice covered the snow, glittering like crushed glass. She spent the morning sweeping her porch, trying not to think of Noah's quiet defiance or the bishop's disapproving face. But her mind wandered to both every few minutes, no matter how she fought it. She decided she couldn't stay idle. After wrapping her shawl tight, she hitched her horse to the wagon and drove into town. The wheels squealed in the slush, and the cold bit her fingers through the gloves. The main street was half melted, lined with muddy ruts, and the faint clang of a blacksmith's hammer echoed from the far end. Olivia stopped at the land office, its sign creaking in the wind. Central Rail Company, filed holdings and claims. Inside, the air was stuffy and smelled of paper and ink. Mr. Hargreave, the county clerk, sat behind the desk, spectacles perched low on his nose. "Morning, Mrs. Stenner. You're looking better than last I saw you. How's the homestead?" "Cold, but standing," she said. "I came to see the tax records on my property." He frowned. "You already received your notice, I believe." "I did," she said, setting her jaw. "And I aim to see who signed off on it." Hargreave sighed, flipping through the ledger. His fingers paused on a page, tapping twice. "Here we are. Central Rail Company. Notice filed by Raymond Fitch, district agent. You owe $82, including interest." Her eyes narrowed. "Interest? My payment was up to date through September." "That's what it says here," he said, sliding the book around for her to see. Olivia bent over the page. The handwriting looked right. Curled letters, neat. But one thing stood out. Her signature at the bottom was a forgery, drawn too clean, too perfect. She felt a chill that had nothing to do with winter. "That's not my hand," she said, voice low. Hargreave blinked. "You sure?" "I've been signing my name for 40 years, she snapped. "I know my own pen." He leaned closer, frowning. "Well, I'll be. Seems you're right. This ink's different from the others." He flipped back a few pages. "Same signature style shows up on 3 other claims. 2 ranchers and 1 widow east of town. All under Fitch's filings." Olivia's stomach turned. So he's cheating people, taking land piece by piece. Hargreave lowered his voice. "If you're right, that's fraud. But you'll need proof. Bring witnesses, someone who can vouch for your payments. Otherwise, the sheriff can't move on it." She straightened her shoulders. "Then I'll find witnesses." When she stepped outside again, the sky was pale and high, full of wind. For the first time in weeks, she felt something stronger than fear. She felt purpose. As her wagon creaked toward home, she spotted a familiar figure walking beside the road. Noah pulling his own small sled piled with wood planks. He paused when he saw her, shading his eyes with one hand. She stopped the wagon. "You're out in this cold again?" He smiled faintly. "Somebody's got to keep your walls upright." She hopped down, clutching the reins. "You shouldn't be here. The bishop." He lifted a hand gently. "I know, but he doesn't own the road, and he doesn't own my conscience." Olivia studied him, the firm line of his jaw, the snow melting on his coat. "I went to town today," she said. "Found something in the clerk's ledger. That railroad man forged my name." Noah's eyes narrowed. "You can prove it?" "Not yet. But I will." The clerk's seen enough to doubt the filings. I just need witnesses. Folks who know I paid my dues. He nodded slowly. Then we'll find them. You're not alone in this fight. Her throat tightened. Why are you still helping me? After what your bishop said? Because the bishop teaches obedience, he said. But God teaches justice. She blinked hard, fighting back tears. You really think God cares about a widow's tax notice? Noah's voice softened. He cares about every sparrow that falls, and every widow who stands when she should have fallen. They started back toward the farm together. Snow crunched under their boots, and the low sun cast long blue shadows over the land. When they reached her yard, Olivia felt a strange warmth spreading through her chest. That evening, they worked side by side, stacking the last of the firewood. When they were done, she invited him inside for coffee. They sat at the table, quiet, the lamplight pooling between them. Olivia reached into her coat and unfolded the letter. I'm not sure how to fight men like Fitch, she said. They've got money, papers, and law on their side. Noah leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. Then we fight with truth. Truth is harder to bury than any of that. She looked at him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. You sound like a preacher. He chuckled. Just a carpenter with a Bible. When she stood to pour him another cup, he said quietly, God's fixing more than wood between us, Olivia. Her hand paused over the kettle. She met his gaze, and the silence that followed was not awkward, but tender, like the soft hum of life after a long frost. Outside, the wind stilled. The air around the house held that peculiar calm before the heart knows something good is coming. For the first time in years, she did not feel like a woman on the edge of losing everything. She felt like someone beginning again. Snow blanketed the land again by Christmas week, soft, steady, and kind this time, without the rage of storms past. The world looked new, as if forgiven. The barn Noah had rebuilt stood tall and clean against the gray horizon, its roof shining with frost. Inside, lanterns hung from every beam, filling the space with warm gold light. Olivia had polished the floors, set up a table of bread and stew, and gathered garlands of pine she'd cut from the creek line. For the first time since her husband's death, her home felt ready to hold laughter. Noah arrived just as dusk fell, guiding his wagon through the snow with his usual quiet patience. Evening, he said, stepping down. Smells like heaven itself in there. Olivia brushed snow from her shawl. Don't go flattering my cooking. It's simple fare. He smiled. Simple's what folks remember. By 6, neighbors began to arrive. Ruth Ann with her husband and little niece, 2 farmers from town, a few Mennonites, and even a pair of Amish families who'd come despite whispers from the bishop. Their sleigh bells jingled into the twilight, carrying warmth against the chill. Inside the barn, the talk grew lively. The laughter of children bounced off the rafters, mixing with the soft crackle of a stove Noah had built from salvaged iron. Olivia moved through the crowd with bowls of stew and mugs of coffee, her heart thudding with something she hadn't felt in years: belonging. At one point, Ruth Ann caught her arm. Look around you, Liv. This place was falling to ruin a month ago. Now it's the warmest spot in the county. Olivia's eyes swept the room. Noah stood by the corner beam, carving a small wooden cross, his hands steady and sure. He didn't talk much, but folks gravitated to him all the same. There was something about his quiet strength that made people draw nearer instead of away. When supper ended, someone started singing a carol. Silent Night. One by one, voices joined in until the whole barn hummed like a living hymn. The lanterns glowed brighter, catching the sheen of tears in more than one eye. After the song, Noah approached Olivia. Got something for you, he said, pulling a small bundle from his coat. She frowned. What's this? He unwrapped the cloth to reveal a little prayer stool made of smooth oak, carved with delicate vines. I noticed you kneel by the hearth sometimes. Thought you could use a softer place for it. Her throat tightened. She ran her fingers along the wood, tracing the simple cross carved in its center. It's beautiful. Not perfect, he said, but neither are we. Olivia looked up at him. Why do you keep doing things like this? He shrugged. Because they feel right. The air between them went still, filled with more meaning than either could voice. Then she said quietly, You shouldn't have. You'll have your bishop on me again. Noah's smile didn't waver. Let him come. Tonight's the Lord's business, not his. Her eyes glistened. She wanted to thank him properly, but words failed. Instead, she said softly, Would you stay a while, after folks leave? He hesitated, then nodded. I'd be honored. The night went on with stories and song. The children dozed on quilts laid out near the stove, and the grown folk lingered in quiet conversation. Outside, the stars blinked through drifting flakes, and the wind sighed over the plains like a long, peaceful breath. When at last the guests departed, Olivia and Noah stayed behind, tidying the barn in the soft glow of one remaining lantern. Their hands brushed once as they stacked chairs. Neither pulled away. Olivia broke the silence first. I can't remember the last time this place felt alive. Noah turned to her. You gave it life again. You opened the door. She laughed softly. You did most of the hammering. He set the last chair in place, then looked at her for a long moment. You've changed, Olivia. Have I? A month ago you couldn't stand me fixing your barn. Now you're fixing the whole town's heart. Her cheeks flushed. You're a smooth talker for a man of few words. Not smooth, he said. Just honest. The lantern light flickered between them. For a heartbeat, the whole world felt still. Then Olivia whispered, almost to herself, It feels strange to hope again. Noah's voice came gentle and sure. That's how you know it's real. They stood there in the quiet barn, surrounded by the smell of pine and the faint echo of hymns. Snow drifted against the door, soft as breath. And when Olivia knelt on the stool he'd carved, she didn't pray for help this time. She simply whispered, Thank you. The morning after Christmas was bright and cruelly cold. The snow shone like glass beneath a hard sun. Olivia stepped onto the porch, coffee steaming in her hands, when she spotted a rider coming fast down the road. The sheriff's star glinted on his coat. Her heart sank before he even spoke. Morning, Mrs. Stenner, Sheriff Dugan said, dismounting. He looked weary. Got some business to deliver. He held out a folded paper. I'm sorry. It's the foreclosure notice. The railroad filed it through Topeka. Says you've got 2 weeks. Her hand shook as she took it. Even after all I've paid? She whispered. He sighed. They're powerful men, Liv. Don't mean they're right, but the law's the law. He tipped his hat and rode away. The cold air stung her face, but the ache inside was worse. She went to the barn. Noah was there, tightening a hinge. They're taking it, she said, voice breaking. All of it. He froze, then stepped closer. I'll talk to the bishop. Ask help from our district fund. No, she snapped. You'll lose everything. Tears filled her eyes. You've already risked enough. That night she packed her bags by lamplight, leaving a note on the table. Thank you for teaching me to believe again. Then she hitched her wagon and disappeared into the falling snow. The storm rose without warning, thick sheets of snow sweeping over the prairie, blotting out sky and road alike. Noah stood at his doorway, reading the note she'd left, his heart pounding hard beneath his coat. The words blurred before his eyes. "Thank you for teaching me to believe again." For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Then he grabbed his coat, lantern, and reins. Outside, the wind screamed like a living thing. The horses fought the harness, their breath white in the dark. He mounted and drove into the blizzard, calling her name again and again, but the storm swallowed every sound. "Olivia!" he shouted, voice raw. The snow stung his face, numbing his hands. The trail was gone, replaced by a shifting ocean of white. Still he pressed on, trusting instinct, praying with every step. "Lord, guide me to her. Don't let me be too late." At last, through the blur, he saw the faint shape of a wagon half buried in snow. The horse stood trembling, reins loose. Noah stumbled forward, lantern light flickering across the drifts. And there she was, slumped over the seat, lips pale, eyes closed. He lifted her into his arms, holding her close. "I've got you," he whispered. "I'm here now." Then he turned toward home, fighting wind and snow, carrying both their hopes through the storm. Noah pushed through the snow until dawn, every muscle burning. When he reached the cabin, he laid Olivia by the fire, her skin cold as stone. "Stay with me," he murmured, stripping off her wet coat and wrapping her in quilts. He boiled water, rubbed her hands, and prayed without pause. "Lord, you brought me to her. Don't take her now." Hours crawled by. The firelight trembled against the walls. At last, Olivia's lashes fluttered. She drew a shallow breath, voice barely a whisper. "You found me?" "I never stopped looking," he said, tears bright in his eyes. "You're safe." Outside, the storm quieted. Snow drifted from the roof in soft heaps. Then came a knock at the door, firm, deliberate. Noah opened it to find Bishop Stoltzfus, face solemn beneath his black hat. "Noah Yoder," the bishop said, "is this how you show repentance?" Noah met his gaze. "Love that serves is never disobedience." The bishop looked past him to Olivia, then back again. For a long moment, he said nothing. Finally, his shoulders sagged. "Perhaps I have judged too harshly." He turned away, leaving footprints fading in the new snow. Noah closed the door and knelt beside Olivia, whispering, "Grace won't be denied." A week later, sunlight broke over a sky scrubbed clean. The snow melted into glistening rivulets, turning the earth dark and rich. Olivia was stronger now, though pale, wrapped in one of Noah's wool coats as they rode into town. The wagon wheels creaked through half-frozen mud, and each mile seemed to bring her heart back to life. Beside her, Noah's hands gripped the reins steady and sure. They stopped before the courthouse, where townsfolk had already gathered. Word had spread, folks whispering about fraud, forged ledgers, and the widow who meant to fight back. Sheriff Dugan met them on the steps. His hat was pulled low, his eyes tired. "You ready for this, Liv?" he asked. She nodded. More than ever. Inside, the small courtroom smelled of dust and pine resin. Mr. Hargreave, the county clerk, sat near the front with his records. On the other side of the room stood Raymond Fitch, the railroad agent, smug in his polished boots and fur collar. His smirk faltered only when Noah entered behind Olivia, carrying a satchel of documents and witness statements signed by neighbors. The judge, a gray-haired man with spectacles perched on his nose, banged his gavel. "Mrs. Olivia Stenner, you claim these filings were falsified?" "Yes, sir," she said, steady. "That's my name, but not my hand." She handed him the papers. "And these folks can swear I paid what I owed." The judge studied the records, then glanced toward Fitch. "You wish to respond?" Fitch shifted uneasily. Must be a mistake. Clerks misfile all the time. No, Hargreaves said, standing abruptly. The ink's different. The handwriting too. He forged them, Your Honor. I'll swear to it. Gasps rippled through the room. The judge leaned back. Then the matter's plain. These debts are void. The land remains in Mrs. Stenner's possession. Sheriff, take Mr. Fitch into custody pending further inquiry. Fitch's face went red as the sheriff clasped cuffs around his wrists. You'll regret this, he spat, but nobody answered him. When the gavel fell again, Olivia felt her knees weaken. Noah steadied her arm. The room burst into murmurs, neighbors cheering softly, Ruth Ann smiling through tears. Sheriff Dugan took off his hat. Guess justice still lives out here after all. Olivia turned to Noah. I couldn't have done this without you. He smiled faintly. You could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to. Outside, sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps, warm and forgiving. Olivia paused there, face lifted toward the sky, and whispered, Thank you. By the time March came, winter had truly given up its hold on the land. The snow had melted into dark, fertile soil, and the prairie shimmered with new life. The creek behind Olivia's house ran clear again, its banks dotted with crocus and tiny yellow primrose. The air was sweet and damp, full of promise. Birds were building nests in the cottonwoods, and each morning began with the soft chatter of wings. Olivia stood outside the barn, breathing in the scent of wood and earth. The barn was no longer a place of ruin. It was solid, straight, and shining in the sunlight. She ran her hand over the smooth grain of the new door and smiled. The walls still held faint marks from Noah's tools, each one a memory carved into the wood. The day of their wedding dawned bright and calm. Neighbors arrived in buggies and wagons, their wheels creaking through puddles on the soft ground. Ruth Ann came early, carrying a fiddle and a basket of fresh bread. She hugged Olivia tight. You look radiant, she said. Like spring herself. Even Bishop Stoltzfus arrived, his black coat crisp, his expression solemn but not cold. When he stepped forward, he offered his hand to Noah. I was too hard on you, he said simply. You followed your conscience. That's no sin. Noah took his hand without hesitation. Grace doesn't keep count, Bishop. It just starts over. They gathered under the apple trees by the creek. The branches were bursting with pale blossoms, their scent drifting through the air like a hymn. The preacher's voice carried steady and sure, reading words of faith, endurance, and second chances. When he asked them to join hands, Olivia felt her heart pound. Noah's hand was calloused but warm, the strength in his grip steady as the earth beneath them. I was too old for this once, she whispered, eyes glistening. Noah smiled, his gaze full of quiet devotion. Then let's be old together. Laughter rippled through the crowd, soft and kind. The preacher pronounced them man and wife, and the guests cheered as a breeze shook loose a flurry of white petals that fell like gentle snow. Olivia laughed through her tears, clutching Noah's hand as if she never meant to let go again. Later, they gathered in the barn for supper. Lanterns hung from every beam, glowing golden against the wood. Children ran between the tables, chasing each other's laughter. Ruth Ann played her fiddle, and the old hymn, Blessed Assurance, filled the air. Noah and Olivia danced slow near the fire, her head resting on his shoulder, his cheek brushing her hair. As twilight deepened, they slipped away to the edge of the creek. The water reflected the first stars, shimmering like scattered silver coins. Olivia leaned into him, the cool breeze lifting her veil. We made it through the storm, she whispered. He nodded, brushing a petal from her hair. And found spring on the other side. Behind them, the lamplight from the barn flickered warm and steady. The sound of laughter drifted through the night, mingled with the rustle of apple blossoms. Olivia closed her eyes, heart full, soul quiet. After years of loss and wandering, she finally knew what home felt like. Hope, she thought, had been there all along, waiting for the thaw. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.